I'm actually excited to have you on because I think you have a lot of insights, and specifically when it comes to the professional and business development area that young adults may benefit, and they could learn, and they could also reach out if they have any questions. So let's start like this. Just tell us a little bit who you are, what do you do. I'm going to go deeper after, but I'll give you the chance to open up.
Sure. My name is Brent Herd. Who am I? Man, I am a father of 3. I am a husband of my beautiful wife. I am a son. I am a brother, and I'm a friend. But below all that, I've had a pretty interesting career. I was been in the technology business for 20 plus years, I like to say. I don't like to go any more than that.
Wait a second. Before we get into the technology and professional aspect of your career, tell us where did you grow up?
Was born in Albany, New York. And when I was 8 years old, we moved to New Orleans, Louisiana.
How was growing up in Albany?
Albany was awesome. Albany was like a cocoon. Albany, we had come from a big family. God, we had probably 50, 60 family members in Albany.
And that's like cousins and
uncles and aunts and grandparents, and everyone was pretty deep as it pertains to Albany.
Were they immigrants?
Yeah. So my dad's, my great grandparents. So my dad's grandparents, they immigrated from Poland to Ellis Island. This was in the early 1900s, and they landed.
What's the reason they decided to emigrate?
Better life slash. I was actually having this conversation with my uncle the other day. They wanted to get away from the hatred towards Jews. The pogroms. Yeah. In Poland, small town in Poland. That was on my dad's side. Herd. On my mom's side, similar case. They immigrated as well to Ellis Island and then to Albany, and similar reasons: better life, more opportunity, is why they came.
Out of all places in New York, why Albany?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. The only answer I would come up with is because it was the capital. It's the capital of New York, and so they landed. Now, that's a total guess. There was probably some relatives in who had landed in Albany before them. And they were actually in the garment business. My great-grandfather, my grandfather's father, Joe Herd, had a tailor shop in Albany, New York called, I think it was Herd Tailors. And they tailored, everything, suits and all kinds of different things.
It's a profession really popular in the whole country.
Yeah, it was very popular in the whole country. The other side of my family, my mom's, my grandfather, my mom's dad, had an advertising agency. So I'm somewhere between advertising agency and tailor. I don't know exactly.
That's the thing that
where it lands
into tech.
That's right. Yeah, I guess that's the fabric of technology. Yeah.
Interesting. So, entrepreneurship or business was part of the culture growing up.
Entrepreneurship, very much so. Yeah.
What about your parents?
Parents, my father he went in the advertising business as well. So
what the advertising business looked like?
Advertising at the time. Well, initially, this was in the late 70s, early 80s. The advertising business was he worked for my mom's dad who owned the advertising agency. So he worked for the agency in sales,
Got it.
obviously, and he would go sell to, clients in Albany to become part of the advertising agency. So then they would buy media, they would create the creative, they would do all the things that a brand needs as it pertains to advertising. And then my dad got hired by the NBC television station in Albany, New York, to be the local sales manager. So he was the guy that was the manager of all the different salespeople.
And what did he sold? What was his job?
So it was television. So selling spots. So television sales, you're selling the spot where that the advertiser buys to run the commercial.
So basically, kind of like what he was doing, just in a different media. Most probably he was doing that before with his family in newspapers. I'm guessing.
No, meaning the advertising agency.
Advertising, yes.
The advertising agency was all media, so it could be newspapers, could be magazines, could be television, could be radio, and then he went specifically into television.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so he was selling advertising spots for NBC Network.
For NBC Network in Albany, New York. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then in New Orleans, where we moved when I was
before we moved to New Orleans, what was the Jewish life in Albany?
In Albany, it was interesting. Great question, actually. I grew up in a conservadox family, meaning what I mean by that is my grandparents, his parents, they kept kosher. They were Orthodox. We were more on the conservative side, but we spent so much time with my grandparents that, we sort of, that was normal for us. We went to a conservative shul, conservative, really moving towards Orthodox shul in Albany called Temple Israel, which is where I went to Sunday school, and really where my foundation of Judaism came from, quite honestly, because, it was just part of our life. It was it was just a culture that we lived. It was, it was holidays, it was meals, it was Shabbat dinners, and we would have them all. We would have all of them.
Was your grandfather like a mentor to you?
No, more so my father was. I was close with my grandfather and my grandmother as grandparents, but the relationship was actually a bit closer on my mother's side with my grandfather on my mother's side.
They also lived in Albany?
Also lived in Albany, yep. And we all just spent a lot of time together. Most, weekends was with family, visiting aunts and uncles, going to see, all of our, just seeing and being with family. Yeah.
Okay, so it was a good Jewish upbringing.
Amazing Jewish upbringing. It was, there were a lot of times I didn't want to go to Sunday school.
Oh, that's everyone.
But, the very warm memories of being raised in Judaism, felt very connected to it, and had some experiences throughout my life, which we'll talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're 7 years old, 8 years old?
I was 7. I think I may have just turned 8 when we moved to New Orleans.
And what's the reason you guys moved?
My father got a job with the NBC television station in New Orleans, which was a much bigger market than Albany. So it was a big, and when you think of market as it pertains to television, market is essentially the size of the city. So New Orleans, much bigger city than Albany, New York, small town, sort of medium-sized city, Albany. And my father got a promotion to become the general sales manager for this NBC television station in New Orleans.
So it was a promotion, basically.
Promotion, that's right. So we moved. Yep.
Who are the clients for the television advertising? Is it local business? Is it corporations?
Local business, but could also be the bigger local businesses. I mean, it could be, like obviously we're here in Atlanta. It could be a Home Depot. It could be a Coca-Cola. It could be a UPS. It could be a, any company that's headquartered in that city that wants to advertise on a local basis. Most companies advertise on a national basis now, but back then, when you didn't have the internet, and companies wanted to make sure that their brand was known, they would advertise locally in those markets. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys moved to New Orleans.
Moved to New Orleans.
How was the transition?
Tough.
In what sense?
Well, New Orleans is a really different town. New Orleans is a bit of a New Orleans has a ton of culture, but if you're not from New Orleans, it's kind of weird. You're very much an outsider.
Was that contrast simply going from small city to big city, or was New Orleans specifically?
I think it was more going from city where we had 50 plus family members around us at all times to a city where we had no one. And so you really feel the aloneness and the lack of community when you make a move like that, especially in the formative years that I was in, which was 7, 8 years old.
What did you or do you guys search for a community? Your parents looked for a community?
Oh no, of course, yeah. We joined the temple, immediately, and but the Jewish community in New Orleans is very different. Just a very again, if you haven't been there for many, many years, it takes time to integrate, like any community does. But yeah, so it felt very stark. What's the word? It felt very cold, is what New Orleans felt like. Yeah, as a kid.
I imagine you were missing Albany.
Oh, very much so. Missing Albany, missing the family, missing everything that we had known. Yeah.
Did you notice like an improvement in the lifestyle that you had? Or was it?
Great question. You know what? It was like the money didn't matter. The lifestyle didn't. The improvement in lifestyle was not nearly as important as the community that we had left behind. There was no comparison. It was on another level of meaning to compare the two. They don't. When this day and age, people are pushing for make more money. There's nothing that can fill a void like community.
Could you expand on that? Because from what we hear from young adults a lot, or that at least from our side, from where we stand, is that they come to us because they are searching and they are yearning for a community. And at times, I may think that they have a good job, they have the cushy salary, but nevertheless, they come because they're looking for community. What does community have that is so powerful? Yeah,
that's a great topic, actually. No money will ever replace community. I've learned it from experience. And the reason why community is so important is the way I describe it now is, and I think always, I don't know, for a long time, community is medicine. It's just medicine. It's like medicine for the soul, actually, is what it is. And, this is not like an ad for Chabad. This is just truth.
This could be also an ad.
I mean, it could be, but this is truth in the sense of we are social creatures, human beings. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. Loneliness, in some cases, is worse than is actually disease and can create disease. And community is the magic of community is you're with people who are going through the same stuff that you're going through. Everybody's going through stuff. And when you're with people and you can talk about it, you feel much less alone. You feel much less like I'm solo on this island, dealing with whatever I'm dealing with, and we're all dealing with something. And much more like, hey, this guy's got this going on, that guy's got that going on, and we're all in this thing together. And I think real community, you feel that. This place is that for sure.
When you say community, is there a difference between an in-person community, online community, Jewish community, non-Jewish community, the local, I don't know, book club? What would be the ideal community if someone wants to, finally get out of their bubble and look for a community?
I think community is about in person. Number one, you got to be face to face, flesh to flesh, and be with people and talk to people and see and sense and feel people. That's what community is about. Yes, you can have online community, but I just don't think anything will ever replace in person. I just don't. And that might be a personal opinion, but I've tried it all different ways myself, and you gotta go flesh to flesh, in my opinion.
What's the advantage of face to face, or like what you cannot see online that you could see in sense?
I don't think it's see. I think it's feel. I don't think you can. When you're online, you can't feel someone. When you're with them, you can feel them. Mm-hmm. You can feel and sense their energy, and feeling and sensing someone's energy is a completely different ballgame than I think than being in an online community.
So seemingly it's not about like the information that you'll get from someone else, but it's more about the connection with the other person.
It's about the connection, and you feel connection, you sense connection. I mean, you when you're with somebody, those are the small, those are the small things that you kind of light up when you're with certain people, and you want more of that. It's because we're social creatures. Mm-hmm. We're made that way.
Okay. Do you mind elaborating? You said that you cannot buy a community with money from experience. Do you mind sharing what was your experience?
Yeah. What did I say?
You said that nothing can replace community, or you cannot buy a community with money.
Yeah. Well, I guess I actually just kind of go back to my our experience of moving from Albany, New York to New Orleans. The real reason was moving to New Orleans was searching for more, bigger, more. Dad making more money. We actually didn't have a bigger house. I think Dad had a nicer car, but not. I personally, I would say it was a decline in lifestyle, and the reason it was a decline in lifestyle is because we left our bubble, we left our community, and community is worth more money than you can ever make, in my opinion. Community is the reason why you actually go make a lot of money, because you're full. Community is the reason why you are acting in who it is that you truly are, because you're full. I think loneliness is the reason why you're not achieving your goals. It's about, you have to surround yourself with people that can help you become the greatest version of you. And there's nothing that can do that like community. And again, this is not an ad for the young Jewish professionals, but the truth is if you really lean into community, really lean into it and get uncomfortable, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to come in by yourself and not know anybody and extend a hand and say hello and introduce yourself. It's uncomfortable to show up over and over and over again. It is. But, the truth is that your life is on the other side of that uncomfortability. Your life is on the other side of that fear that's inside you that says, I don't want to go to Shabbat tonight because I don't want to meet new people or extend my hand. It's uncomfortable to me. My whole thing is lean into that uncomfortable, especially when it comes to community.
Mm-hmm. Especially young adults also.
God, how much are you going to cut up of this to be commercials?
Right. Okay. I think the question here is like, when would you make that distinction between like wanting to grow on keeping it safe or living the bubble and growing at the same time?
I would say never keep it safe. As a business professional, which we all are, never keep it safe. Safe is the same as dying, in my opinion. comfortable is the same as dying, in my opinion. That's me. I'm a little bit different on this subject. Because what I know is that uncomfortable, fear, doing what my brain is telling me not to do is actually where we grow. And, our brains are telling us not to do something, thinking that our brains are protecting us. But in actuality, they're not. It's holding us back. And so, my opinion on this is always lean into the uncomfortability. If anybody's thinking, I wonder if I should go to, Shabbat dinner tonight. I don't want to go because I'm going all by myself. I don't have anybody to go. I would say lean into that. That's your own fear or uncomfortability. Lean into that always. Yeah.
Is there a level, or is there like a position in life or a time in life when you are not uncomfortable anymore? Because at times you tell yourself that, I'm uncomfortable now, and hopefully in the future I will not be uncomfortable. Is it, in the future you don't get uncomfortable, or at every level of the game and every stage of life, there's always the sense of being uncomfortable that you have to get over it?
Every level of the game, there's uncomfortability. And now, if you're not uncomfortable, I would say figure out how to get uncomfortable, because what I believe is that we all achieve, we unlock new levels of ourself by going through uncomfortable times. Growth is from uncomfortable times. Growth is from when we feel fear. Because doing something when we feel the fear is one of the most rewarding things for human beings. But our brains trick us to not do whatever it is that we're fear we're feeling. Our brains say, don't do that. Like, whatever. That's just for whatever excuse our brains make up.
And how do you lean into the fear?
How do you lean into it?
What does it mean to lean into the fear? To just do it regardless?
Well, look, everybody listening to this, you can ask yourself, where do I feel the fear? Personally, I feel it in my stomach. I feel it in my gut. Like if I feel, I'll feel butterflies, about doing something. And when I feel that, to me, that says go. It used to say stop, but now it says go.
How did you train it from going to stop to go?
By getting myself into very difficult situations that I needed to move through that fear in order to achieve or get the result that I wanted to get. Mm-hmm. So I saw that when I did lean into that, it would always end up being a positive for me. And so the more times that I did that, the more times that I continued to follow that feeling. It's the opposite of what we're taught. It's the opposite of what is said, like in the sense of or what our brains tell us, which is, don't do that thing, or don't put yourself out there, or don't get on that podcast, or don't put yourself on social media, fearful of whatever it may be. And then that means go do it.
Interesting. So instead of just processing the same signal.
It's the same signal. It's just taking the action instead of not taking the action.
Interesting. Yeah. Seems so simple, but yet it's so difficult.
It is, because because our brains and our egos are, millions of years old, and think that it's protecting us and making up stories in our minds, and we believe those stories. Mm-hmm. And the trick is to not believe them.
So always getting uncomfortable and
everything you do.
Okay, so you're newer. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Which is why for young Jewish professionals, you should do a night of uncomfortability, or you should do an event around getting uncomfortable.
We'll call it the awkward event.
Yeah, call it the but because the truth is the only way you get better is by doing it over and over and over. You're always going to feel the fear, but the only way you get better at it is by feeling it and doing it anyways. Because fear, if the definition of fear is false expectations appearing real.
Interesting. false expectations appearing real.
Right.
So it's the story that you tell yourself that it never will happen.
Yeah.
Never happened, it will happen.
That it's believing those thoughts. Yeah.
We're kind of like very interesting creatures.
Massively.
Massively.
Yeah.
I want to get to the project that you and Sean are working on, but let's give that its own proper time. So you're in New Orleans, and how was Jewish life in New Orleans?
Jewish life was okay. Interestingly enough, I was actually bar mitzvahed in New Orleans. When we moved from Albany to New Orleans, the school systems in New Orleans were not nearly as good, and I went to private school in New Orleans. And so I wasn't challenged. I ended up skipping the 4th grade and still wasn't challenged. And in the 8th grade, the year of my bar mitzvah, my parents wanted to, continuously give me challenge. So they put me in a Catholic school for my 8th grade year. I played football and baseball, and I was an athlete. And so I was able to meet the kids before school. And when the kids found out I was Jewish, it turned into a complete fiasco in the sense of there'd never been a Jewish kid who had attended this school. There was a bunch of anti-Semitic things that happened to me. And, I was 13 years old. I had no idea, why these kids would say anything negative about, it was like, where did this come from? And
was this from the you guys sense this from the faculty or only from the kids?
No, just from the kids. And so a semester into my 8th grade year, my parents pulled me out and put me back in the school I was in. But I'd never, I'd never experienced something like that before. And initially, it made me question my Judaism. It made me question, why do I have to be so different? Why do I have to be something, I was, kids would say terrible things. And then after time, it made my bond to Judaism get much stronger. And seminal moment for me in my life, that experience.
You mean this experience of suffering anti-Semitism?
Correct. Yep, in 8th grade.
When you said you bonded much more with your Judaism, what do you mean?
I just felt like I just protected it more. It became something more that I valued much more than I had prior to that.
And that was like an appreciation?
Appreciation for it, yep. It almost went from like, it took me a while to understand it though. What was, why these kids were, doing that. I was young.
Who did you turn to when you had that experience?
Turned to my mom.
And what she had to say?
Well, she immediately jumped in and pulled me out of the school. And then my father ended up writing letters to every priest and rabbi in the city of New Orleans, telling them about the experience to highlight what was happening. And so yeah, it was a traumatic event, actually.
Did your parents give you like an explanation, or were they able to?
Yeah, I think as much as possible, as much as you can. I mean, they explained to me, just from a level of ignorance, essentially, just that, the only way that these kids would say the things that they said was because they were taught it.
Right.
And they were taught it by someone, likely their parents. And that comes from a level of ignorance and lack of understanding. And so, it was kind of the first time that I think it was the first time in my life that I actually I stopped taking my Judaism for granted is actually what that ended up becoming. And I wouldn't say I necessarily leaned into it really heavily at the time, but I just stopped taking it for granted. And then over the years, it grew in sort of importance in my life, and still does,
Seems like the reaction every time I mean, you at an individual level suffered anti-Semitism, but us as a nation, we just suffered, the biggest massacre or pogrom, as we were opening the conversation, since basically the Holocaust. And the reaction was a very overwhelmingly positive one, that people are suddenly taking their Judaism not for granted anymore. There's actually a sacrifice, or there is something way more than just like a title of or a family history, that and a heritage that they have, that they're Jewish. It's suddenly like, oh, I am Jewish. It becomes personal. And it's interesting that every time, or it sadly takes anti-Semites to remind us, or maybe it's connected to what you mentioned, that, the uncomfortability is what makes you grow. And over here, it comes from the outside, sadly, instead of coming from the inside. That we become uncomfortable not being Jewish enough, or not doing Jewish enough. But, every time someone else reminds us, it just makes us grow.
Big time. Yeah. It completely was a growth moment, one of these seminal moments in my life.
Did you, I was just thinking, your parents most probably did never experience anti-Semitism because you grew up in Albany.
That's right. It was a shock. It was a shock to everyone in my family.
So it's not that they had the tools to deal with it.
Nothing. Other than, my father was a very, he was just a massive personality character of a guy. And he was well known around town because he was, he worked for the television station. And so he really used his, his who he was and the platform that he had to communicate to everyone that he could in not such a nice way about what had happened. And about, he never held back his opinions, probably where I get it from. And so he was quite vocal about it to every religious leader in the city, not just rabbis, but priests in the city as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now you're in your teens.
Yeah.
You go back to, was it public school?
So 13 years old, I went back to the private school that I was at.
Which was not a Catholic school.
Which is not a Catholic school. Graduated, and then we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina when I was 13.
13?
13, same year.
Oh, okay. So within a year you moved twice.
No. Because we moved to New Orleans when I was 7.
Oh, right. Yeah,
7 or 8. We moved to Charlotte when I was 13. So about 5-6 years later. Same situation. Father got a new job at the NBC television station in Charlotte.
It was a promotion also?
Promotion, yeah. Bigger market.
Yep. Now, how was incorporating, or the transition from New Orleans to
amazing to Charlotte? Amazing. Charlotte was a great city. This was in the late 80s, and it was a growing city, really great. It was a great town for me to end up doing the rest of my middle school and high school. Jewish community was very small, but we were a part of it, when it was very small. And my father passed a few years back, but my mother's still in Charlotte, and my sister. And so they've been, in that community now for, 30 plus years.
You went to school in Charlotte also?
Yeah, went to middle school and high school in Charlotte. Yep.
Okay, what about college?
College, I went to UNC Wilmington. Go Seahawks.
Okay. And what did you pursue your degree on?
Yeah, I studied business. I started out actually freshman year in psychology and then changed to business. I love psychology, but I thought business for some reason was more interesting. And I was there for 4 years, graduated in 1996, and then I moved to New York City immediately upon graduation.
You had an opportunity, or you just wanted to?
So my father and my older brother at the time kept saying to me, "You've got to move to New York when you graduate. It's the only place to start." It was just programmed into my mind. You got to move to New York City.
It was like the Wall Street. What was?
It was just like call? Get to New York, and you'll start your career in New York, and then go wherever you go.
Okay.
And I said, okay, I'll listen to that and do that. sounded like a good idea. And my father helped get me a job with an advertising agency in New York City called Saatchi & Saatchi. And I got a job as a local media buyer where I was buying media for on behalf of the local businesses in New York City. But it was a huge shop. I mean, local businesses were very big businesses. And so I did that for about a year, where I was buying local media. So I would have salespeople pitching me, and then I would decide where to spend that money. And about a year into my job, one of the local sales managers for one of the radio stations in New York City approached me for a job to come be a junior salesperson for them. And I accepted. And so I moved from Saatchi & Saatchi to the number one hip hop and R&B radio station in New York City. And by the way, it was the number one radio station in the country at the time. And the name of that radio station was Hot 97. And there were a couple, I'm sure people will know these people. The morning show was two guys by the name of Dr. Dre and Ed Lover. And they were the morning show hosts. And this was at the time where people like P. Diddy and Jay-Z and Biggie, all these guys were coming up in their careers, and all of them would come through the radio station. So I got to meet, all of these celebrities.
Meaning they would come to the studio.
Come to the studio to do interviews.
And you were at the studio as well?
And that's where my office was, yeah.
Okay.
So, like one morning, I'm in the office, and Jay-Z walks into the sales department because he was lost and he needed to find the studio. So I walk him to the studio. And so I met a lot of people. I met J-Lo, I met John Travolta, I met Diddy, I met Jay-Z, I met all these, very famous.
Were they famous at the time?
They were. Yep. They were pretty famous at the time. Up in not the level of global fame that they have now, but they were famous for sure. And that was really exciting. I worked there for a year and a half, and what I was doing was I was selling radio all over New York City. So I was knocking on doors in Brooklyn, Bronx, Harlem, all over New York City, selling local radio. So meaning selling people 60-second spots to advertise whatever their business was.
So you switched positions from being the buyer to
the seller. That's right. And that was a really cool job. I actually loved it. I loved the radio. I love music, and so that was tons of fun for me. But I always was connected to technology. I always loved technology. As a kid, my dad, I would be the kid that he'd be like, "Hey, we just got a new VCR, new television. Brent, can you set this thing up?" And I would. I just knew how to put the things together, and it was very natural for me. And so I was always looking for like something different as I was selling radio. I was like, I wanted a little something more, a little more challenge, something a little more intellectually stimulating.
Was it hard for you doing sales?
Since I come from such a sales background, because my dad was a sales guy, my brother was a sales guy, it was natural because I just kind of, I watched them and I would just do what they did. But sales is always uncomfortable, like cold calling people. I mean, like I literally, phone book calling people. Now, at the same time, I failed to mention when I was in college, my sophomore year, I decided to go sell books door to door.
Why?
Because I wanted to make money.
Okay.
And I had a fraternity brother who had done it the year before and made like $20,000. And he was like, "You got to come do this." And I was like, "Okay, great." So I sold books door to door my sophomore year, but I had the personality. I knew how to do it. I watched Dad do it for my whole life. So, but selling in New York City is it's a different ballgame. I mean, no happens pretty quickly. And especially a kid who had grown up in New Orleans and Charlotte, had a Southern accent, Jewish Southern accent, selling radio for a hip hop, radio station. It was as different.
Mix.
Exactly. But I always liked different stuff. And so I sold for a year and a half, and then I was looking for something different. It was 1998. And a girl that I was dating had a friend who was working for a technology company. And she said, hey, like, I think they're hiring, maybe you want to go talk to these guys. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. And so I, put on my best suit and, get as dappered up as I could. And I went and interviewed, and I got myself an account executive job in 1998 with Yahoo.
Oh, wow. It's like was it a big deal, Yahoo, then, 1998?
It was getting to be a pretty big deal. It was kind of like this new thing that was happening over here on the side that everyone was like, what? This is cool. Like, there's a lot going on here. Like, this could be really the next thing. And when I got in and started working there, it was a completely different world. It was like, it was just the beginning of this entire digital renaissance.
What were you selling?
I was selling advertising.
So always selling
on Yahoo. So like on the website, banners and buttons. That's right. I was selling banners and buttons. I would go and sell to the CMOs of companies, and I would talk to them and try to persuade them to move money from from traditional TV and radio, which is what I knew, to digital, which was Yahoo. And most people were like, you're crazy. Why would I move any money from traditional to digital when no one really knew about it at the time?
Did you, or let's preface, is believing in the product essential for selling?
Well, at the time for me, it was like, do your job and, push hard and sell. But you know what? At the same time, it was so interesting to me. So I did believe in it because it was very unique and different. And I could see how it had the ability to really transform a lot. I wouldn't say at the time I wouldn't be telling you the truth if I was like, yeah, I could see it, how it would transform the world. I don't think I saw that, but I could see that there was real change that was about to happen.
This is a before and after era.
Yeah.
So you were doing the same rounds, but now for Yahoo.
I was doing the same thing, bigger companies, more national companies for Yahoo, selling advertising on Yahoo.
How much were you selling a year?
Oh, I mean, we were selling hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Like Yahoo as a whole, or you were selling hundreds
I
of
think
millions?
I think I was selling maybe, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 million a year, something like that.
Was it hard to get people to invest?
Very.
Because you basically have to educate this 50, 60-year-olds.
100%. You got to re-educate them. And not only that, you have to move them to a place where they're willing to take a risk.
They need to get uncomfortable.
And them taking a risk, the problem with that was them taking a risk has to do with their livelihood. Because if they took this risk and it was the wrong risk, they could lose their job. So it was bigger stakes for sure. But also, it wasn't so early that people were like, oh, I have no idea what this is. I mean, like there was things happening already. You know, it was the .com boom at the time. And then unfortunately the bust. But
were you working in New York still?
New York City. I was in New York City until 1999. I moved July, interestingly enough, right before 9/11, or not right before, a couple years before. And I moved to Atlanta.
What brought you to Atlanta?
Yahoo. They were opening the offices were open, and they were staffing up. And I was ready to get out of New York because I was a Southern guy, and the city was a lot, and it was, I was 21 or 22, and I was just running 100 miles an hour for pretty much 3 years, and I wanted to get back to a lifestyle that I was more familiar with and comfortable with, and I had an aunt and uncle here in Atlanta, and so they moved me here in 1999, this coming July, 25 years ago.
Wow. Where in Atlanta did you come?
Where did I move to?
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Post Collier Apartments.
Where's that?
Off Collier Road.
Or is that
Right up 75, a couple exits, like up by North Side.
okay? It's like Fulton County.
No, right here, like 10 minutes from here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not very far.
And the offices was in Midtown.
Offices
Yahoo?
were in Midtown. They were actually at the old Biltmore Hotel, right near Georgia Tech,
Okay, and you were still selling advertising.
selling advertising. Yep.
Okay. And how did that go?
Sorry.
How did that go in Yahoo?
Oh, it went great. I mean, I was selling advertising. I was selling advertising for Yahoo through 2003. So I was with Yahoo 98 to 03.
So you worked through the bust.
Through the bust, yeah.
And how was that for Yahoo? How was the bust for
It was
Yahoo?
terrible. I mean, the stock went from, I think, $300 to like 10, and it rebuilt, but it never got back to what it was. It was rough.
Were people laid off?
I think so. Yeah, I think we had layoffs for sure.
The source of revenue was only advertising?
Source of revenue was only advertising. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so really, they really depended on you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Very much so. And then I left Yahoo, and I actually, for a year, I worked for an advertising agency called Moxie Interactive. I was doing sales here in Atlanta. And then I did a couple of little startups, technology startups. And then in 2005, I got a job with a company called advertising.com, which was a really cool technology company in the media space. I opened up the offices for them here in Atlanta, and then we were acquired by AOL. And then the leadership team from advertising.com ended up running the ad.com AOL business. So all of a sudden, at 31 years old, I was in charge of about $250 million in revenue and about 70 people. And I was managing that team for a couple years. And that lasted through 2009. And then in 2009,
Where did you have like leadership skills, or where did you develop all of that?
Where what?
Where did you develop leadership skills?
Where did I develop leadership
Yeah.
skills? By making mistakes
On the job.
on the job. That's right.
What would you say are skills or qualities that if someone wants to be a leader or wants to take a leadership position, they should hone in?
I mean, number one skill for being a leader is the level of emotional intelligence.
What does that mean?
Understanding yourself and understanding others. So if you look, I think at the end of the day, really the way I like to think about leadership is I actually quote it as the inner game of leadership. And the reason I quote it as the inner game of leadership is because leadership has everything to do with how much you understand yourself. Because your behaviors and your actions have everything to do with you. And so as people, human beings, we get triggered by things, we get, our buttons pushed by things. And the more that you understand yourself, the more that you are able to lead people authentically. Because at the end of the day, people will run through walls for leaders who are vulnerable, leaders who can talk about their own weaknesses, leaders who say, I don't know, leaders who say, I'll get back to you. In my opinion, the leaders who have all the answers are not the leaders. The real leaders are the ones who say, who are vulnerable, who truly say, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I'll get back to you.
So if the leader doesn't know the answer, or what would be the distinction between the leader and the one who's asking the question?
Say it again.
What would be the distinction between the leader and the one who's asking the question? Because if they both don't know the answer, is it about caring? Is it about getting things done. Like,
Yeah.
being vulnerable at the end of the day could be seen as weak when the team needs an anchor.
Yeah. Well, I disagree. I mean, my belief is that vulnerability is strength. My belief is that the leader, it's almost like leaders who are vulnerable, they're real people. It's like you want, that, you sense that. You also sense when someone is coming up with a bunch of BS and giving you an answer that's actually made up or comes from an ego place. When at the end of the day, business is just people. It's just human beings. So the experience I've always had is and where I found my most success is when I'm the most vulnerable. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, leaders have to have the qualities of, being able to drive and push and work hard and nothing is beneath them, and get into the granular stuff of work, like nothing's beneath them to do. But at the end of the day, when you have a big leadership position and you're leading people, my belief is the number one quality is vulnerability. Number one.
So if someone, a young adult who wants to get promoted, wants to get into those positions, would you suggest they should be vulnerable in order to get those positions or that promotion? Or once you get to that promotion, then you could start?
I would suggest that they're asking the question of themselves and of their boss, what are my blind spots? What are the things I'm not seeing about myself? Everybody's got them. The problem is most people won't actually take that into consideration. But the truth is that if you can see your blind spots clearly, that gives you the greatest sort of leg up, and have an open mind to it, versus the opposite. Yeah.
Okay. So you're in your late 20s. You're in this pretty important, or a lot of responsibilities on your shoulder. And what happened next? Or you said you went
early 30s.
Early 30s. You
Yeah.
went to the startups. You went to the advertising agency.
So we were acquired by AOL. I was running that business, and that's where I learned a lot about leadership, because I made a lot of mistakes. And then I went to run a company called Share This, which was a little sharing widget. And I was running sales. I was the head of sales. Built up a team. And then in 2010, I was hired to open up the Twitter offices here in Atlanta.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So how did Twitter get a hand of you?
Good friend of mine was running sales for the East Coast, and he needed someone to open up Atlanta for him. And he called me, and initially I said no, because it was a job. It was a job below the job that I currently had.
Below in what sense?
Title wise, it was a regional director role versus a vice president of sales role. I was in a vice president of sales role, and he convinced me otherwise, and I took the job in 2010, and it was the greatest ride of my life.
Was Twitter, when you started another small startup?
150 people.
The whole thing?
Whole thing. I was the either 8th or 9th salesperson in the company.
Mm-hmm. You ever got to go to San Francisco to the headquarters?
All the time. I was out there all the time. Yep.
What for?
Well, I mean, we had meetings and conferences and sales meetings and, all kinds of, different sort of, you had to go to headquarters pretty often.
What was the culture at Twitter at the beginning?
Awesome.
In what's, or better said, Twitter became very polarized or politicized this past few years. Well, specifically now with acquisition by Elon. But what was at the beginning?
In the beginning, it was as good as it gets, because everybody felt like they were on a mission, and the mission was to help democratize the way people communicated. That's what Twitter was. It helped to democratize communication, meaning someone who had never experienced a conversation or communication with someone in the United States. Let's say they lived in China or Japan, Korea, whatever it may be. It almost like opened a door to a level of communication. So we felt like it was democratizing how people communicated. And when you have a lot of people who are on a mission together, it's just there's nothing more awesome. And so everyone worked really hard around the clock. And we built the business my business individually built it from 0 to about $150 million in revenue. And the business as a whole, we built it from about 10 million when I got there, total revenue. And when I left, we were doing about 2.5 billion in revenue.
From advertising?
From advertising, solely.
Interesting.
99%.
So it was like hypergrowth, basically.
Hypergrowth, 5 years, yep.
How do you get people to believe in a mission?
It's a good question. It takes a lot. It took me a while to really understand it. Certain things in the world were happening. For me, when I started at Twitter in 2010, I was like, what is this? I was for a year. I was like, how is this thing going to work? Why is this going to even scale? I could see it, but then I was, I'd have moments of like, this isn't going to work. And then in 2011,
why you had those thoughts?
It just was. I felt like at the time Facebook was really scaling, and people were connecting emotionally with Facebook because it was like you were seeing your friends and people, pictures, all that stuff, and that really wasn't Twitter. And I was just like, man, I don't know how this thing's gonna go. And then in 2011, everything changed because people started using Twitter in the Middle East for the Arab uprisings, where people in Egypt were using Twitter to help overthrow the government. So they were, using Twitter. They're like, hey, meet here and we're going to, do da-da-da-da. And then that like took off like wildfire.
Why would that take off like wildfire?
Because Twitter's an open platform. So anybody who had a phone could exchange messages about where to be, when to be there. And they would all gather and they essentially use Twitter to help overthrow governments.
So was
that were doing bad stuff.
Was that only in the Middle East?
Only in the Middle East at the time. That's right. But that was a seminal moment for me because I really got to see the power of Twitter, which I didn't really understand until then, even as an employee.
So what was it for you until then? Just a messaging
It was just
app?
a tool. It was like, people are just, people are tweeting like, hey, I'm having eggs and bacon, for breakfast.
Right.
Versus what was it doing on a global scale?
Why didn't you use Facebook?
No, I used Facebook.
No, sorry. I mean, like the uprising. Why didn't they use Facebook?
Twitter was just such a simple tool. It's like you can get a tweet out the door in 10 seconds. And I think it was just the ease of use with the speed allowed it to create the kind of whirlwind, the momentum.
So the simplicity and speed of it.
Simplicity and speed. That's right.
Interesting. Sometimes you have to keep it simple in order to.
You always have to keep it simple.
Why always?
You're funny. Because I think we as human beings complicate things.
So we are complex by nature.
Human is complicated. Like as a foundational element, human is complicated. It just is. And in it being complicated, we then complicate things that are actually very simple. I'm included. And we could go on another complete podcast about this subject, but yeah, it's simplicity, I think, is key for everything. Everything that you're trying to do, it's simple. Like, keep it simple, stupid. KISS. Keep it simple,
Keep
stupid.
it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Good one to remember. Fear
Yeah.
and KISS.
Yeah. Fear, false expectations appearing real. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Good. So we provide the complexity to the
We as humans.
to whatever occasion.
Yep.
So we don't need to make it complex. Okay. So then you saw the real power of Twitter.
Real power of Twitter. And then it started doing amazing things like,
But before that, was there like any political like divide in the country at the time in 2010?
No.
So who was like? So Twitter didn't have like an enemy, or didn't have like?
No, Twitter was like loved. Twitter was loved. Not only was Twitter loved, I remember, I don't know, 3 years into it, I would say. So I was asked at least two years into it, maybe three. My work there, I was speaking on behalf of Twitter. So they would send me to conferences, and I would speak to thousands of people about the power of Twitter, and it was like, this was like my 15 minutes of fame. I mean, I felt like a famous person, like, people waiting to say hello to me after I spent. I was just a guy that worked for Twitter. I was like, this is crazy. And what had nothing to do with me, it had everything to do with the power of Twitter and the brand of Twitter. And my point saying this was that I remember there was a moment where Twitter had the brand recognition of Coca-Cola.
How do you measure that?
They do these brand studies,
okay,
where they can, you understand the unaided awareness. Like, hey, 50 people, random people. Have you ever heard of Twitter? Yes or no? Yes.
Got it.
Have you ever heard of Coca-Cola? Yes or no? Yes. And we were on the same level of unaided awareness as Coca-Cola, and that just blew my mind. Like, meaning, as a brand, Twitter had the same recognition as a 150-year-old company, and the company was less than 10 years old. It's just unheard of. And so at that moment, at that time, it said to me, just the power of the platform was so great and so expansive.
And that was a feeling across the whole company.
Whole company. It was like the thousands of people that worked together, like everybody just walked in lockstep with each other. Everyone who was there at that time, we just had the most special experience because everyone felt the same thing, how special the opportunity was that we all were working for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was Jack Dorsey around when you were there?
Oh yeah, Jack Dorsey was. He was around. I think he was the CEO for a short period of time. Yeah, he came to Atlanta. I've spent time with him before. He's a amazing guy, obviously.
Mm-hmm. He really built a good company.
Yeah.
So you were in Twitter for how long?
I was in Twitter for 5 years, 2010 through 2015.
Doing media
sales. I was doing sales, and then I was, running the team, and then I was running a couple of different businesses across the country, and had a bunch of different jobs.
Mm-hmm. And until when were you in Twitter?
I left 2015, July. I'd been running. I was running so fast, so hard for so long. At Twitter, I was really worn out, and my kids were little at the time, and I actually had my existential moment when I left Twitter. I had my midlife crisis early. I had it at 41. Most people have it at 50 or 60. I had it at 41. Which ended up being a great thing for me. But so I left, and how this happened was I left.
Were you doing well? Meaning, were you financially was?
Oh yes, financially was doing.
Professionally, we're doing well.
Professionally, financially, everything was on the up and up. And the reason I left the technical reason was I met a guy in Atlanta who started WebMD, very successful entrepreneur. And he had started a healthcare company in Atlanta called ShareCare. And ShareCare was just in its infancy. And we met through a personal trainer, physical, like working out. And we met, and he ended up recruiting me to come run a division of ShareCare. And I came over as the chief commercial officer for ShareCare. And at the time I was like, man, this is like, big upgrade for me in terms of everything, money, title, the whole thing. And I was tired. I had been traveling a ton at Twitter. I had built a really big team. And I made the decision to leave. And 2 days after I made the decision to leave, I hadn't actually resigned, but I made the decision to leave. I had an emergency appendectomy.
Oh, God.
And so I rushed to the hospital, had my appendix taken out. And that surgery was the beginning of my midlife crisis, my existential moment.
Why the surgery marked?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Was it related to stress?
Well, now that I look back, I was related to a lot of stuff. I had been working so hard.
When you say work hard, could you explain
on 4, 5, 6 planes a week, traveling from city to city to city to city, sales, conferences, dinners, just really
spending a lot of time.
I was getting sick every 3 months.
Oh, God.
I was getting a bad case of strep throat every 3 months.
When you media selling at Twitter, is it shaking hands with people, with other CMOs you mentioned, or other people like that?
That's right. It was going everywhere and anywhere that those CEOs were, CMOs, CEOs in the country.
So there was no online selling at the time?
No. Zoom was not a thing.
No, not even Zoom. Like Facebook ads or Twitter ads.
No. It was you needed to be there in person. And so, this was the time where I was just stretched at every fulcrum point in my life. I felt very pulled because of my children.
How old were you at the time?
I was 41.
And your kids were?
Let's see. So this was 9 years ago. So because I'll be 50 a week from today. Thank you very much.
Mazel tov.
Sammy was... So 9 years. Sammy's almost 15. So Sammy was almost 6 and Dylan was almost 3. So 6 and 3. And I hadn't, not that I wasn't with them, my kids, but I wasn't really with them. When I was with them, I was somewhere else in my head. When I was with them, I was stressed out about something else, business or, I just wasn't with them. But I didn't know I wasn't with them until I had a health scare. And so I literally woke up a Sunday morning. I had a little stomach ache and it turned into a big stomach ache and it turned into a, appendix. And then I had surgery and then I came home from the surgery and I'll never forget it. That literally came home that same night. Because I actually was in such good physical shape because I was working out so hard too, which by the way is really important because if your body ever gets sick or you ever have surgery, you'll stay in the hospital based on your level of physical condition. So I come home from the surgery and, I've talked about this before actually on my own podcast where something happened. It was like it was a spiritual moment for me, where I felt like I saw my children for the very first time, like actually saw my children, like actually, like took the full spirit of my children in a way that I'd never had before. And I think it was because I had I don't know if I was like at the edge of life, but I think I was as close to the edge of life as I had ever been in my life.
Those were your thoughts at the time?
It was just, what experiencing what I went through. I was, yeah. I had a knowing that was a close call.
So you say that it was the first time you were able to see your children.
Yeah.
Is that like the first time you were present? That's what you mean, or it's something beyond that?
No, I think it was a combination of present / I didn't feel the stress that I had been feeling for so long. I just got, I don't know, just like everything got clear. It was like the only way I can describe it is I feel like it sounds very ethereal, but I feel like I stepped through the curtains. It was almost like I pulled the curtains back, and you know what it was? It was like that moment, for whatever reason, realigned my priorities. Is what it was. It was like that moment where, I mean, I was working so hard that, if I would have kept going, I say thank God it was an appendectomy and nothing more. And I just think that moment, I know, it realigned my priorities in my life. And I did not have my priorities in line.
Okay, so this is a big topic when it comes to young adults.
Yeah, I bet. Good. Let's
Let's
go. Should this be another episode?
We could chop it up and make a whole other episode.
Damn, we've been going, huh?
Yeah. How long have we been so far?
I don't know, but anyways, this is the meat and potatoes right here.
We're a little slow to get in it, but work-life balance or priorities. Yeah, specifically living in a culture in America where it's all about hustling and, you need a professional career and to climb the ladder. Is this model broken or someone who's been there, done that? What's your message to young adults?
Yeah. No, it's a great. I was just looking at our elapsed time here. You're gonna have to cut this thing up, by the way.
Definitely.
Yeah. I learned, arguably, the biggest lesson of my life in that moment. And what I learned was, just for so long, I had it backwards. For me, everybody's different.
What was backwards?
My whole life was about work and about money and about role and about how many people can I have under me and about how big was my job and about all of these external factors. And for whatever reason, that was just my makeup for so long and how I was programmed. And after that moment, I got sick. I mean, I was sick for a while, for 6 months, a year. And when I say sick, meaning I was depressed, I was anxious, I 3 months after, let's say I had the appendectomy, I think in June, in October, I had walking pneumonia. I mean, I was upside down. And what I realized was that it was like a lie. It was just it was it was a bunch of crap that I had believed for a long time, and that I had attempted to be a certain way, because I thought that that's what, would get me to where I needed to be, get me to success. And I was very wrong. I was just very wrong. And so what I know now is the, fulfillment is really about back to community. It's about family. It's about friends. It's about experiences in life. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you got to work and you got to pay the bills and but you know what? It's up to you as to how big your bills need to be. It's up to you as to how big of a lifestyle you need to live. I used to think I needed to live a big lifestyle to be seen a certain way, to be viewed a certain way. And it couldn't be further from the truth. The things that really matter are that you're doing something you enjoy every day, that you're with people that you love every day, that you are building, your family and being with your family in a way that you want to be with your family, and some sort of a relationship with God. I mean, that's that, and in reverse order, where, honestly, it is about your relationship with God, number one, and then it's about everything else. And the only reason I know that is because I went through that. I would have never known that, or maybe I wouldn't be here, be quite honest with you. But for me, this whole journey's been about my faith and my connection, more than anything.
Did that spark, or was that a reason to lean into your Judaism more, or into your spirituality more? And how did that play out?
Massively. I'll tell you, because most of my life, I was the great thing about my family was we would always talk about, things and, feelings, and, if we needed to go to a therapist, we'd do therapy. And
was not a stigma in your family?
No, not whatsoever. Especially, and the greatest thing for me was my dad was very open to talking about feelings and emotions with me.
Where did he get that from?
I couldn't tell you.
Because this probably was not
honestly
generation thing.
God given, like completely a God thing, because he was such a tough, strong man. But I could sit there and tell him how I felt, and my mom would talk. We'd talk about it, my feelings. And so I always thought that was very normal. So I loved going to therapists and talking about my stuff. And so after this happened, I went to see a therapist, this older, very spiritual woman, 82 years old, and not Jewish. And you know what she said to me?
Tell me.
She said, "Go to temple." I hadn't been to temple, had not been practicing Judaism, really practicing in a long time, because I was working so hard. I didn't give it any space and time. And she said, "Go to temple," and that's actually when I started coming here
to Chabad.
To Chabad.
When was this?
This was, we belong to the temple. So then I guess this will be 2015, 2016, 2017. Mm-hmm. Because I actually met Rabbi Schusterman, I want to say 2017.
Where did you guys meet?
I couldn't tell you. I may have just come. I may have just shown up one day, kind of.
Why the Chabad?
I don't know. It was like the reform. It was like, the temple was good for. It was like, it's interesting. It's like, man, this is good actually. One of the things that I learned actually through this woman was that, for me, and I think I learned this about then just Jews and Judaism, there's actual symbolism in Hebrew letters. And she was the one that told me this. She was not Jewish. She was like, there's symbols that are familiar to you in Hebrew. I think she actually knew Kabbalah, kind of a thing. And so I would go to the temple, and like I'd go to Shabbat services, which I hadn't been doing in years, and they would be singing, whatever, song. I'm looking at the prayer book and I'm crying in temple, which made me then say, okay, something's really going on.
Why
here.
were you crying?
I don't know. Just emotion.
Just started crying.
Emotion was coming up and out of me.
You ever heard about the Yiddish neshama?
No.
So Yiddish neshama translation is the Jewish soul.
Jewish soul, yeah.
It's referred to as that.
Yeah.
That part of a Jew that can never go away on a time, just comes out from nowhere suddenly. Like, you can't explain why or what. It just started coming out.
Yep. Yeah. And that's pretty much either what was happening or that I had not, served it, whatever it may be. And then I don't know how I got here, but I met Rabbi Schusterman, and I just fell in love with him. I mean, he's become a very good friend of mine. And then actually we had a really interesting, and then like these little things, just weird things started to happen. Like in 2017.
One second before there, what did he see different?
About,
or have you seen anything different about
Chabad?
Or like, was this your first time being exposed to Chabad?
Yeah. I'll tell you, for me, at the time, I still didn't put together the spirituality piece, honestly. There was something for me that was almost like deeply familiar about being around, and this is going to sound terrible, like the real Jews.
We're all real Jews.
Yeah. I know we're all real Jews, but like there was something about being around the black hats, the robes, and I think this is just me. I don't know if this is me or if this is everybody, but there was something that was familiar in a way where I had no idea why I was familiar.
Organic Judaism?
I don't know what. I'll tell you, like, on a deep spiritual level, my whole life, I had always been a feeler. Like, I just would feel my way through life. Like, there was always deeper meaning in things. Like, I'm a feeler. I feel. And almost like in a mystical way. And when I went through this existential crisis of mine, this midlife crisis, which I think at the end of the day is just getting to know yourself better. I ended up tracing my mother's lineage back to Spain in the 1400s. And in the late 1400s, there were hundreds of thousands of Jewish mystics that were expelled from Spain.
Correct.
And there was something in that deeply resonated with me, because I always have felt that level of mystic in me, just deep and feel and in a different way. Like, and the only reason I say different was because when I would talk to other people about deep and feel, and people would look at me like I was crazy.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I was different. Sometimes I was like, I don't want to be different like that, but I just, have now accepted that's me. And then I traced my mom's lineage back to, Spain in the 1400s. And I was like, I think there might be something here. Because then over the course of the past 9 years really, my level of connection to spirituality is just absolutely like off the charts, in terms of connection. And I think it continuously unfolds and will unfold throughout my life. But what happened was I then went to Israel in 2018. And I had never been to Israel. I was 43 years old at the time, I guess, 44. I was on a work trip. I was running a sales for a software company in San Francisco. And we had clients in Tel Aviv. So I took my first trip and I went to Israel. And I got to Jerusalem and I was by myself. And I went to the wall, and at the wall there, what's the guy who helps to wrap the tefillin? What's it called?
I forgot his name, but yes.
But what's it called? The thing?
The booth, the tefillin booth.
The tefillin booth, yeah.
Yeah.
So I go up to this guy. I'm like, hey, I'm what do I do? I had never wrapped tefillin.
What about your bar mitzvah?
Nope.
So what was your bar mitzvah like?
It was reformed.
Reading Torah
Yeah,
or
reading
left Torah?
That's it. Yeah. So I go to the wall and he goes, where are you from? The guy, the rabbi. I was like, Atlanta. He goes, go Braves. I was like, what? And he goes, do you know Rabbi Jewpreneur? I was like, of course. I was like, yeah, I know him. He was like, he's my cousin. I don't know, whatever.
Cousin, very possible.
Yes. And I come back from the wall and I'm putting my tefillin back and I go up to the guy and I said, hey, listen, I'm here tomorrow night, but I don't have anywhere to go for Shabbos. And, I said that to him before I went to the wall. I come back from praying and he goes, you're having dinner tomorrow night at my in-laws in the old city. I was like, okay, cool. Come back Friday night. I had a midnight flight out of Tel Aviv. I come back at like 7 to the wall. It's packed Friday night at the wall. And he had drawn on a sheet of paper the directions to get to his in-laws. And now it's like 8:30 and I'm looking at directions and I'm like, I have no idea how to get to where these things, I was like, I'm not doing this. I was like, I'm just going to go back to the airport. My flight was at midnight. I was like, I probably need to get going anyways. I start walking up the steps all of a sudden, and there's thousands of people around me. All of a sudden somebody taps me on the shoulder and I turn around and it was a guy, unbeknownst to me, that was watching the exchange between me and the guy, the Kotel, is that what it's called?
Kotel is the wall. So.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And the guy, and he goes, hey, let me help you get to where you're going. Yeah. So it's like, I was like, wow, this is just things like that happen there, from a spiritual perspective, coincidences. So I end up having that moment in Israel. I come back here.
Let's just clarify, that was Rabbi Schloss's house? Rabbi Schloss?
I think,
remember?
Yeah. New York?
Yes,
yeah.
He's originally from New York.
That's right. Yeah, awesome.
Great. Yes.
The back, you look out the back of his place and you're looking at the Dome of the Rock.
Yeah.
Right. Beautiful.
It's pretty magical.
Yeah. So I had that experience in Israel. I came back and we kept talking and yeah, it's been this really unbelievable. If I zoom out 100,000 feet and see what the past 10 years have been of my life, it's been this deep connection to spirituality, mysticism, Judaism, which is what Judaism is for me, which is why I connect so deeply here. And those are the things that I never would have really understood without going through the process. So life has these crazy journeys, and I think we just we all end up having to, we really end up just living life on life's terms, versus what we all think we're living it on our terms. And I think that's when God laughs, when we think we're living it on our terms. So.
You recently got your own pair of tefillin.
Yes.
Was it last year?
Yeah. No. It was
a few months ago. This year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's always a big step.
Yep.
What does tefillin mean to you?
Connection to God. It's my way to connect. Yeah.
You rap daily?
No.
Putting on the spot over here.
No, it's okay. You can. No, I probably rap 2 to 4 times a week.